This is the kind of testimony that breaks through every wall of unbelief and reveals the unshakable, mysterious love of Jesus. When human effort failed, when doctors could not help and false beliefs gave up, heaven itself responded to a simple cry of faith. In one holy moment, after 7 long years of pain, shame, and hopelessness, Jesus stepped into a woman's life and turned her story into a living miracle. How can anyone deny such power? This was no coincidence, no trick of emotion. This was the touch of a Savior who still heals, still saves, and still answers those who call on His name. What medicine could not do, what prayer by tradition could not achieve, one whisper, "Jesus, help me," accomplished completely. The bleeding stopped, the bondage broke, and a heart once filled with despair was restored to peace. Beloved, this is more than a story, it is a divine invitation. As you follow this testimony, open your heart and reflect deeply. Join this community of faith-filled believers, share your thoughts, and let your spirit be stirred. My name is Hadiza. I was born into what many people in our neighborhood called a blessed home. My father was one of the wealthiest men in our city in Indonesia. Our house was big, surrounded by tall walls that kept away the noise and people from outside. Inside, everything was beautiful. Flowers lined the walkways, fountains sang in the gardens, and every corner smelled of clean air and incense. I had everything I ever wanted. If I asked for a book, it was brought to me the same day. If I wished for a new dress, it would arrive before sunset. My father loved me deeply, or so I believed. He used to say I was the jewel of his heart. My mother was kind and gentle, always careful with her words, always trying to please my father. I was their only daughter, with 2 brothers older than me who went to school in the city. Life seemed peaceful, like the soft rhythm of rain on our windows at night. Our home had a mosque built inside the compound. A beautiful one. My father said it was to help us stay close to God without having to go out to the public mosque. I was proud of it. Sometimes I'd watch my father pray, his forehead touching the clean white mat, his voice low and steady. I thought he was the holiest man alive. He often told me to pray and obey, to never argue or question, and I always nodded. Most evenings, after prayers, my father would sit quietly in the mosque when everyone else had gone. He would ask me to bring him tea, and I would carry it with both hands, smiling, proud that he trusted me with that small duty. I never doubted him. He was my father, strong, respected, the man everyone admired. In my young mind, our family was perfect. We were blessed. We were safe. I didn't know that sometimes, behind tall walls, silence hides pain no one sees. The mosque inside our compound was my father's pride. It was built with white marble floors and tall, shining windows that let in soft golden light every morning. The call to prayer echoed gently through the halls, and I always loved how peaceful it felt. To me, it was the safest place in the world. My father prayed there 5 times a day without fail. He often said that the world outside was full of temptation and corruption, and that's why he built our own place of worship, so his family could stay pure. I grew up believing him. I didn't go to school like most girls. Instead, I studied at home. Tutors came to teach me Arabic, mathematics, and religion. Father said the outside world was not for girls like me. I didn't argue, I trusted his every word. Sometimes, I would sit quietly near the back of the mosque while he prayed. I liked to watch him lift his hands in supplication, his lips moving slowly, his eyes closed. I thought to myself, my father must be so close to God. When I carried his tea after prayers, he would smile faintly and say, "May Allah bless you, my daughter." Those words always made me feel safe. Mother rarely entered the mosque except during prayers. She respected father's wishes and often said, "Your father loves you so much, Hadiza. Always listen to him." So I did. I obeyed every instruction, every rule. I didn't know that sometimes obedience can become a heavy chain, especially when love is used to hide something else. Looking back now, I can see that the walls of our house didn't just keep the world out, they kept us in. they kept secrets in. It was a bright afternoon, the kind when the sunlight feels almost too hot and still. My mother had gone out to attend her friend's daughter's wedding. The air in the house was quiet except for the sound of birds outside. After the noon prayer, my brothers left the mosque, chatting softly as they went toward the gate. My father stayed behind as usual, seated on the mat near the front. He called my name gently, asking me to bring him a cup of tea like I always did. I hurried to the kitchen, poured it into his favorite cup, and walked toward the mosque. Everything felt normal, so ordinary that I didn't notice anything strange. I smiled when I handed it to him, expecting his usual warm nod. But that afternoon was not like the others. Something in the air felt different. My father's eyes seemed distant, heavy with thoughts I couldn't read. He told me to sit beside him. I obeyed because I always did. I remember the sound of the fan above, turning slowly, as silence grew between us. Then the safety I always felt began to fade. His words, his tone, his closeness, all became strange. I will not speak of what happened next. But that day, something inside me broke. My heart, once full of trust, filled with fear and confusion. I didn't understand what had happened or why. I only knew that something holy had been turned into pain. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd be truly honored to have you join this growing family of faith and reflection. Every new heart adds something beautiful to our community. As you listen to this powerful testimony of transformation, we'd love for you to be part of the conversation. Share where you're watching from and what stands out to you in this journey. Your thoughts and reflections aren't just comments. They help shape a genuine dialogue around experiences that have the power to change lives. When I reached my room, I locked the door and cried until my eyes swelled. I wanted to scream, but the walls were too thick and my voice too small. My mind raced, trying to understand how the man I respected most could bring me so much fear. I didn't know whether to be angry at him, at myself, or at God. I just cried, quietly, endlessly. That afternoon changed everything. I was no longer the same Hadiza who smiled easily. I became silent, careful, afraid. The walls of our home suddenly felt like a prison, and I was its quiet prisoner. That night I could not sleep. Every sound in the house frightened me. The creak of the gate, the call of the night birds, even the wind brushing against the window. My heart kept racing as if it was trying to run away from my body. I wanted my mother to come home quickly, but at the same time I was afraid to see her face. I didn't know how to tell her what had happened. When she returned late in the evening, I ran into her arms and broke down crying. She kept asking, "What is it, my child?" over and over. My words came out trembling, shaking, almost impossible to say. When she finally understood, she fell silent. Her face went pale. She pulled me closer and held me so tightly that I could feel her heart beating fast against mine. For a long time, we both said nothing. Then, in a low and broken voice, she told me not to tell anyone, not even my brothers. "Please, Hadiza," she whispered, "let this stay between us." I didn't understand why. I thought mothers were supposed to protect their children and seek justice for them. But I obeyed her because she too looked afraid, maybe even more than I was. The next few days felt like walking through thick darkness. My father behaved as if nothing had happened. He still prayed, still smiled at me during meals, still called me my daughter. But every time he looked at me, my heart shrank. I avoided his eyes. I stayed mostly in my room, pretending to read or rest, when in truth I was just crying softly. Mother stopped talking much too. Her face looked tired, and she would often stare at nothing for a long time. One evening, I heard her praying alone in her room, not in Arabic, but in soft, quiet words that sounded like she was talking directly to her heart. 3 days passed. Then one morning she told Father that she was taking me to the hospital for a checkup. He said nothing, just waved his hand as if it didn't matter. I didn't know that was the beginning of something new. Something I never expected. The morning we left for the hospital, my mother's hands trembled as she packed a small bag. She told me softly to take only a few things: my scarf, my small prayer mat, and a change of clothes. I didn't understand why she seemed so nervous. When I asked, she smiled weakly and said, "Just trust me, Hadiza." We walked out of the gate quietly, leaving the guards behind. The driver took us to the hospital, and after the checkup, my mother said we would visit a friend of hers before returning home. But instead of turning back, the car kept moving farther, away from the city I knew. I watched the buildings change into trees and open roads. My mother looked out the window, silent, her eyes glistening. That day, she didn't cry, but I could feel that her heart was breaking. She was carrying a pain so heavy that she could no longer stay where it began. I didn't know it then, but my mother had already decided to leave everything: her marriage, her religion, and the city itself. She told me later that she couldn't stay in a home where her child's pain was buried under silence. We traveled for hours until the air felt cooler and the noise of the city was gone. By evening, we reached a small town where no one knew us. She said we would rest there for a while. That night, as we sat in a small rented room, she held my hands and said, "Hadiza, we are starting over. I don't know how yet, but we will find peace again." I didn't fully understand what she meant, but the way she said it made me believe her. There was a strange calmness in her eyes, as if she had already spoken to someone greater than herself, someone who gave her courage. I would later learn who that was. The next morning, she told me we were going to another city, far away, a place called New South Wales. She didn't say how, but somehow she made it happen. It was as if every door she needed opened for her. Looking back, I now know that wasn't luck. It was grace quietly making a way for us. The journey from Indonesia to New South Wales felt like walking into another world. Everything was new: the air, the people, even the sound of the streets. My mother and I arrived with only a few clothes and little money, but she looked more peaceful than she had in years. For the first time, I saw her breathe freely. We found a small place to stay near the edge of the city. The woman who helped us find it was kind and gentle. She spoke softly and always smiled when she saw me. She worked with a community group that helped women and children in need. I didn't know then that this was a Christian group. I only knew they were kind, and kindness was what we needed most. At first, I was shy and afraid of everyone. I kept my scarf tight and rarely spoke. But one of the women, named Mrs. Grace, would often visit and bring food. She never asked painful questions, only said things like, "You're safe now, my dear," and "God loves you more than you know." Those words confused me. I used to think God only loved those who followed all the rules perfectly, but she spoke of a God who loved even the broken. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, my mother began to smile again. She found work cleaning offices, and I started learning English from a neighbor. We still prayed, but my mother's prayers changed. She no longer repeated memorized lines. She spoke from her heart, like someone talking to a friend she trusted. Sometimes I'd hear her whisper through tears, "Thank you for bringing us here." Life was still hard. We missed home, our language, and our family. But there was peace in the quiet moments. A peace that came not from wealth or safety, but from something we couldn't explain. One evening, my mother sat beside me and said, "Hadiza, I don't think we found this place by accident. I think God brought us here for a reason." That night, I didn't cry myself to sleep for the first time in months. I didn't know where life was leading us, but deep down, I began to hope again. Our new life in New South Wales was quiet but full of small miracles. The Christian community that helped us never stopped caring. They checked on us, brought food when we had little, and sometimes invited us to join them at their church. At first, my mother always said no. She didn't want to be disrespectful to her past faith, and she didn't want me to be confused. But something about their love felt real, not forced, not showy, just gentle and true. One Sunday morning, Mrs. Grace invited us again. This time, my mother said softly, "Let's go." I was surprised, but I followed her. The church was small and warm, filled with simple music and smiling faces. No one looked down on us for our headscarves. Instead, they welcomed us as if they had been waiting. During the service, I felt something I couldn't describe. It was peace, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that heals it. As the people sang softly, I closed my eyes, and for a moment, it was as if a gentle light surrounded me. I felt warmth inside my chest, like someone whispering, "You are safe now." After the service, a pastor came to greet us. He didn't preach or pressure. He only said, "You're always welcome here." From that day, we began visiting often. My mother started reading the Bible Mrs. Grace gave her. Sometimes she would sit by the window late at night and whisper, "Now I understand what it means to be loved by God." One night, I woke up and found her quietly praying. Her voice trembled as she thanked God for saving us, for bringing us out of darkness. I listened from the doorway, and tears filled my eyes. It was the first time I saw her free, not afraid, not hiding. As months turned into years, our wounds began to heal. The fear that once ruled our hearts slowly faded, replaced by hope. I learned that healing doesn't happen in one moment. It happens little by little, through love, through truth, and through time. Trust was the hardest thing to rebuild. After what happened, I struggled to believe in people, even in myself. Every time someone showed kindness, part of me wondered if it would end in pain again. My mother understood that feeling without me having to say it. She used to tell me, "Healing is not forgetting, Hadiza. It's learning that pain doesn't get to own your heart forever." At the church, I slowly began to make friends. There was a girl named Lily who was just a year older than me. She always saved me a seat beside her and shared her lunch after Sunday service. She never asked about my past. She only laughed and talked about small things, school, books, the stars. I didn't know that simple friendship could feel so holy. My mother joined a women's prayer group. Every week they met to sing, read the Bible, and share their stories. The first time she spoke, her voice shook as she said, "I once thought God had forgotten me. But He was the one who found me when I had no strength left." The room went quiet, and then the women surrounded her, holding her hands as they prayed. I stood at the back, watching, and I felt something loosen in my chest. For me, the change came slowly. I started reading the Bible too. At first, just a few verses each day. One night, I came across words that said God is close to the brokenhearted. I couldn't stop thinking about them. Could He really be close to me, after everything? In the quiet of my room, I whispered for the first time, "If you're there, please help me to trust again." It wasn't a fancy prayer. It was just a tear and a whisper. But something in that moment shifted. I felt as if a soft presence wrapped around me, not demanding, not judging, just comforting. I didn't understand it fully, but I knew it was real. From that day, I began to smile again. Not the pretend smile I used to wear, but a small, honest one that grew a little stronger each morning. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could live without fear. It was a quiet evening, the sky painted with orange and gold as the sun began to sink behind the hills. I sat outside our small house, holding the Bible on my lap. The air was calm, and for the first time in a long while, I wasn't thinking about the past, I was just breathing. My mother was inside, humming softly to a song she'd learned in church. Everything around me felt still, almost holy. As I turned one of the pages, my eyes stopped on a verse that spoke about forgiveness and new life. I didn't fully understand it, but something deep inside me stirred. I closed my eyes and whispered, "God, why did you let all that happen to us?" My voice broke a little. The pain was still there, buried but not gone. Then, in the stillness of that moment, it felt as though someone was with me. Not seen, but deeply felt, like a quiet warmth wrapping around my heart. He revealed to me that my life had never been forgotten. He let me know that sometimes, pain becomes the road that leads us back to Him. He showed me that the wounds of our past, though deep, can become places where His light shines the brightest. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but they weren't like before. They weren't the kind that burned with fear. They were soft and full of release. I finally understood that healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about letting God write something new from it. That evening, my mother joined me outside. She looked at me for a long moment and smiled, that gentle, peaceful smile that always made me feel safe. "You're hearing him too, aren't you?" she said quietly. I nodded. In that shared silence, it felt like heaven had leaned close to our little home. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone loved, chosen, and seen. Years have passed since we left our old life behind. My mother and I have grown stronger, not because the pain disappeared, but because we learned to let God carry it with us. In New South Wales, we found a new family in our church, people who taught us how to pray with our hearts, love without fear, and trust even when life feels uncertain. I have learned that sometimes God allows pain, hardship, or betrayal to happen, not to punish us, but to bring us closer to Him. Our past no longer defines us. Instead, it reminds us of the mercy, grace, and healing that only He can give. I see now that every tear, every sleepless night, every broken moment was a part of a journey leading us to light. I want to tell anyone who hears my story, God is bigger than your pain. He can take what is broken and make it beautiful. He can turn fear into courage, sorrow into hope, and silence into a song of praise. Do not give up on Him. Pray daily, read His Word, and allow His love to fill every corner of your heart. Learn to forgive, not just others, but also yourself. Trust that even when life feels unfair, God is working a plan that you cannot always see. And above all, love one another. Kindness, compassion, and mercy are the threads that bind us to His heart. My journey from fear and despair to hope and faith is proof that no matter how dark your path seems, God's light can always find you. He is always near, always listening, always ready to heal. Our scars can become our testimony, our pain a doorway to His peace, and our lives a story of redemption for His glory.